Oh,
Here we go. And
woohoo!
great. Good morning, Timothy. And it's so nice to see you. I'm sorry that nobody else saw you dancing. Only the first 1 second of that dance, but we can we can work on this in the future
That was that was
streams.
not dancing. That was calisthenics to kind of get my body going and my blood warm.
Right. Well, I hope that you can sustain the code there and finish the live stream at least
Mhm.
before we move to Clubhouse today. So
Sure.
thanks. Sure, great. Okay. To everybody who is on Clubhouse, good morning. To everybody who is watching us on other platforms, good morning too. Today we've got Timothy Langley. You know him, the CEO of Langley Esquire. Yes. Uh, he has been here for quite a while. He has been working in Japanese politics for quite a while. And we have him today with us. And we're going to talk about the important events that happened in Japanese politics this week. We've got a lot to talk about, probably the Bank of Japan and also declining demographics here in Japan and a lot of other things, defense budget and some scandals maybe, but yeah, that's not really something the politicians want to talk about. However, Timothy, without any further ado, I want to give you the mic or the
Okay.
floor.
Thank you very
So
much, Maya.
let's go.
Great. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 103rd episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One. The title of the program is One-on-One because it's one-on-one. We talk with you. So there's an opportunity for you to come up on the stage and to talk and to ask your own questions after we finish this 30-minute briefing. Every Sunday we've been doing this, Maya. I don't know whose idea it was to do it at 8:20 in the winter, but here we are.
Oh wow. Okay. Just a moment. Yes. Well, it was in the middle of summer when one of us came up with the idea, and it wasn't me. So
Yes.
I don't want to disappoint you, but probably you remember that now.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm broadcasting today from the deck of the good ship Santana in the beautiful port of Katsuyama, which is almost towards the tip of Tateyama, which is the end point of the peninsula on the Chiba Peninsula. So the Tokyo Bay is surrounded by the Chiba Peninsula. The bay comes in and then it has Tokyo Bay and Shinagawa, and then it kicks out again towards the Yokohama Peninsula, which has Misaki on the point of that peninsula. So the whole bay is surrounded by these two peninsulas. And I'm I'm out in the wilderness. The Seahawks are scouting me very suggestively. But every week we get together and we talk about what's going on in Japanese politics that's important to you, that you should be following, that has meaning, that portends something that's going to be happening in the very near future. So those are the things we talk about. And we have this 30-minute briefing, and then we roll over into Clubhouse, or we continue on Clubhouse for question and answer. So please stay tuned. Please participate and contribute with your questions if you've got them. Maya was saying, the politicians really don't want to hear about the scandals. That's not actually true. The opposition party, when it's a scandal that involves the prime minister, are very eager to have a scandal. And I think you were a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, Maya, because the prime minister came back from a 6-country tour 2 weeks ago, actually almost a week ago, just in time to open the Diet last week. So the Diet opened last week. That is the 211th session. It is constitutionally mandated to open sometime in January and run for 150, 160 days. Generally speaking, the cabinet decides that. And this particular session will go 150 days until I think it's June 21. It could be extended after that, depending on all sorts of things. Mr. Hagiura, a name that you're hearing more and more frequently now, not just because he is the policy affairs chief within the LDP, but also because he is one of the chief leaders in the Abe faction, which is still searching for its leader. It's got a couple of people that are vying for that title. It looks like he has the pole position, and so he is utilizing that opportunity to do a lot of other things. Anyway, he's the policy affairs chief within the LDP, and he has announced he would like to have 60 bills pushed through this diet session. That's really pretty aggressive. We finished an extraordinary session, you might remember, just before Christmas. Similarly, in that session, Mr. Hagiura said he wanted to pass through 60 bills and supplemental measures. They weren't successful there. I doubt they'll be successful this time either. And the reason is not because of the same situation that we had in the extraordinary diet session. That session was hampered by the Unification Church, the state funeral for Mr. Abe, and a lot of other things that were going on that really hampered and plagued the prime minister. He lost 4 ministers of state. His popularity and approval rating of his cabinet plunged very quickly after the upper house election. The problems that he has this time to pass 60 bills is, number one, the original purpose for the first session of the diet, or the annual session of the diet, the regular session, is to pass the budget. The budget needs to be passed at the end of March. It is accepted on April 1st. And then, April, May, June 21 is the end of this session. There are a lot of other things that are going on. So first and foremost, pass the budget. It is a big budget. There are a lot of things and a lot of complications going on in that. That's going to take a lot of his time. And he's got some alligators that he's got to deal with. The Unification Church, the lingering effect of the Unification Church is one of them. But the other one is the defense spending, which has the opposition party up in arms because their point is the prime minister came up with this going from 1% to 2% without too much of a diet debate. It just happened. We've talked about that frequently on this show. And then the second complaint that they have is he's decided how he's going to pay for it. He's already promoted that idea, and immediately it's started a firestorm, not just with the opposition camps, but also within the LDP itself. So I'd like to talk about that too. But first and foremost, we like to get our hands dirty and talk about the nasty stuff. And the nasty stuff, I think what you were alluding to, Maya, was the prime minister's chief secretary, who happens to be his 32-year-old son. Is that what you were talking about?
Well, that was one of the things, yes, but obviously the most important at the moment.
Okay, yeah, that's the one that's hitting the radars right now. So the story here is, and it's reported in Bunshun, it's highlighted in Shincho. A lot of the pundits are talking about it. I think it's just a flash in the pan. The story is that, well, there are a couple of things going on. Number one, the prime minister appointed his eldest son, 32-year-old Shotaro, to be his chief secretary as prime minister. So the prime minister can choose some of his secretaries. Some of the secretaries come with the office. Every diet member has the opportunity to hire several diet secretaries. Some of them are paid by the state. Some he can pay for from his own pocket. So as you might remember, Maya, I talk about this from time to time. I was a diet secretary in the diet too. And this was quite a while ago, and there was only room for 3 people in the diet offices at that point. So I was one of 3. Currently, the prime minister has his diet office, which probably these days can fit about 6 diet secretaries. That might include a driver. But as prime minister, he's got prime ministerial office there too, and that's about 500 people. And within his own circle, he's got the cabinet that he talks to very frequently, but he's also got a cadre of young, sharp, eager diet secretaries or political secretaries, some that he can appoint. So he appointed his son. It's okay. It happens all the time, but the suggestion of nepotism was there, and so he caught a little bit of flack for that. Now, with this six-nation trip that the prime minister just came on, the story is that the son, in various places, in London and in Paris, probably in Washington, D.C. as well, took the embassy car and went out sightseeing and shopping. Yeah, I don't know how horrible that is, but some bureaucrats who are working in the foreign ministry are real sticklers for rules, and this is not something that should be done. And maybe they don't like the prime minister in any event, and sometimes they're just very busy and imposed upon by some young kid who wants to go see the sights. I don't think it's like that. I think he was too busy to really get away, and the prime minister wants his son to go get some things, some gifts that he can bring back and give to his friends and some of the members of parliament that weren't able to go on the trip. I mean, it's part of the tradition, it's part of the culture here. So it doesn't seem to me to be a big thing, but for some people they can say, no, that's beyond nepotism. It's using state resources for a private purpose. There's a lot of arguments that can be made for that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but a lot of time is being spent on it because, I mean, in this country, everybody loves a scandal. And scandals, in fact, do guide and affect local politics, national politics. So it's something to talk about. But there are other bigger things that I'd like to talk about. So first of all, the 150 days, there are a couple of things that the prime minister needs to do within this period of time. One of them is G7 that's coming up. That comes up in May. But before that is the national local elections and by-elections. This will happen in April. So they've passed the budget at the end of March, April 1st. And then in April, mid-April, towards the end of April, they have these by-elections and the elections for about 27% of local ministerial assemblymen, mayors, governors. Not everybody, it's not 100%, it's about 27%. And so that's key on his radar. Many people are saying, we want to change this prime minister. We don't like this prime minister. He's lost 4 ministers of state. The approval rating is 27% at the last GG poll. We've got to do something with him before he loses any more ministers. With the G7 being hosted in Hiroshima, his election district, and him promoting it, I mean, that was one of the whole reasons, that was part of the reason why he took this 6-nation journey to talk about the defense, the 3 defense documents that were published in December, and to, coalesce this coalition of forces, the countries, the G7, so that when they come to Hiroshima, as the host country, he gets to set the agenda and he gets to invite who he wants beyond the 7 countries that are the main members. So the host country can invite other people, and he's using that very astutely now. He's got to really knock this one out of the park, because it's going to ensure his continuation as prime minister. So he's got the budget he has to get through, and it's a huge budget. Then he's got the local elections, then he's got G7. And if there's any talk of there being a snap election, he's been quizzed on that on the diet floor, in fact. He demurs, he avoids really dealing with it. It's probably not wise. It's not going to happen, I think, until after the G7. So for the prime minister to be building up on that, he wants to make sure that the budget is passed without too much fanfare, that a large portion of the 60 bills that are being promoted are discussed and passed before June 2021, and that he can continue on as prime minister and get all the accolades that he hopes G7 gives to him. So with regard to the budget, last week, the diet started on Monday. There was a speech by the prime minister. Then they opened the floor for opposition party to make policy speeches and talk about what they were going to do in this session. So a lot of the action was taken up for those speeches and the kinds of political statements that the leaders of the various factions and the opposition parties are going to make. And then they started getting down to business on Thursday and Friday. So on Friday, maybe towards the end of the day, was their first budget meeting. And like I said, this is the thing that they're supposed to be doing in the opening session of the diet. They want to clear the budget in the lower house by February 27th. Today is the 29th, so that's 1 month away. They want the lower house to pass the budget and push it up to the upper house, give the upper house a chance to chew on it, to talk about what they want changed and what they want added. And if they accept what the lower house has given to them, then they pass it and it becomes law on April 1st. If the upper house does not like it, it has to go back down to the lower house. It's going to take up a little bit more time. But according to the Japanese constitution, if the upper house doesn't approve of it, the lower house gets another bite at it. They can approve it, and then it becomes law. So that's what he's got confronting him. He's got, for this fiscal year, 2023, it is a 104 trillion yen budget for the entire year. So 114 trillion, keep that number in the back of your mind because we're going to be talking about defense spending and some of the other issues. That's always hinged on what the original budget is, 114 trillion. The issues that he has to confront is, number one, he's got like 6 of them that are really top front and center. The first one is the defense budget that he wants to pass for 5 years, 43 trillion. So 114 trillion for the entire annual budget, 43 trillion for a 5-year budget for defense spending. This is 17 trillion more than it was in the previous year. And what it means is that for every year, 4 trillion needs to be generated to hit this number by 2027. So for Japan to go from 1% of GDP devoted to defense spending to 2% by 2027, the country needs to spend 4 trillion yen per year that it needs to pull out of the air somewhere. The prime minister's plan is to increase corporate taxes, to increase personal consumption taxes, and to raise the tobacco taxes. This is how he closed out the year, and there's just a lot of confusion going around that. Taro Aso, who is the vice president of the LDP and a very powerful political figure in his own right, on several public speeches was talking about how the LDP was completely behind the prime minister, and this is the way it was going to go, that the consumption tax would probably rise, but certainly corporate taxes would rise and personal income taxes would rise. And that caused a huge brouhaha within the LDP. This is the vice president of the LDP saying that, and already he's generating controversy within the party that says, we didn't agree to that. You never flew that by us. And we're really upset that this from 1% to 2% and how much this was going to be just kind of came out of the blue. We weren't consulted with it. So within the party, that has caused a lot of rifts. And with the Seiwakai, the former Abe faction, in this kind of pole position, 98 members compared to the second largest, which is about 54, 55 members as a faction. There's a lot of weight that the Seiwakai holds. And that gives Mr. Hagiura, the policy affairs chief I was talking about earlier, a little bit of wind in his sails to, make insistence upon the prime minister and Mr. Aso to do things that are more favorable to the legacy of Mr. Abe and also to Seiwakai. So he's got that to deal with. The payment issue is going to give him a hard time. It's already given him a hard time this last week. It will flare up a little bit more as we get more into the diet proceedings. Another issue that he has raised, you've heard it a couple of times in the paper, is he wants to increase childcare and the ability of the Japanese citizenry to have more children at an unprecedented level. So those are pretty strong words. The prime minister is known for speaking really directly and strongly. When it comes to actual details and performance, he's a little bit lacking there, and that's the reason why some people are very dissatisfied with him. It's a character trait, I believe, that he has. So the birth rate in Japan now is an alarming rate. The highest it was in probably 1982, I think it was. No, in 1973, there were 2.9 million babies born in 1973. And the number of babies born this last year is 800,000. So that's huge. That's a huge drop. With the declining population, a lot of older people, the pyramid, the demographic pyramid is a very unique one in Japan. A lot of the bubble years, what's the generation? The baby boomer generation.
Baby boomers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're all old. They're retired. They're sitting on piles of money, and the number of people that are being born that are supposed to support them and support the Social Security net and pay those taxes is dwindling rapidly. So finally, I mean, a lot of observers have noticed this for a long time, but finally the prime minister has said, now we're gonna deal with this one. They set up the Children's Agency, you might remember, under Suga. It received a little bit of fanfare. Many people thought it was just a flash in the pan to generate good feelings towards the LDP, which is all about business and less about the family. Komeito, its coalition partner, its junior coalition partner, is all about the family, less about business, more about peace. So this coalition does have a weight on society, and the Children's Agency was established, even though some people said it was just, it's just marketing. So it has gone into force, and the prime minister has committed that he will be devoting maybe 5 trillion yen to it this year to get it up and started. So for people who have children now, you might know they get $150 a year for every child that's born. And that continues until, a semblance of that continues until the child finishes elementary school. Having birth is almost completely paid for by the state. And if you have a family, you want to have another family, a family member, artificial insemination is free. It is very popularly used here. A lot of older women are using that method because they've waited with their careers to have children. So that generates its own set of problems. But this is something that the prime minister has committed that he is going to be focusing on. So it's something that we should watch. I don't know how much water to put into it, but it is a big issue. The other thing that's a big issue for the prime minister that he needs to confront in this 150-day session is his green transformation policy. And chief among these is, how do we keep carbon neutral but still supply the energy needs of the country? So he's in a difficult position here. Sakhalin 1 and Sakhalin 2, the Japanese government has authorized the companies, the Japanese companies that were part owners there. They were contributing investors. Russia invaded Ukraine. Everybody pulled out. They put sanctions, not just Japan, but Japan withheld the sanctions of withdrawing from Sakhalin 2 and Sakhalin-1 because of their need for LNG gas. So that sits in place. The other thing that he just has to do it. He has to have the energy needs coming from somewhere. Japan's energy mix is about 8% LNG, and of that 8%, about 10% of it comes from Russia and from Sakhalin-1 and Sakhalin-2. So the problem that the prime minister has is, where do we get other money that doesn't produce that carbon footprint? Because I, as prime minister, am committed to the Kyoto Protocol and also becoming carbon neutral by 2050. So the key here is nuclear reactors. Of the 10 that are in operation now, one of them is already 40 years old. In order for any of these reactors to continue past a 40-year life term, they have to apply for an extension. So there's only one that's applying for an extension now, and the key for the prime minister is to have those extensions not from 40 years to maybe 50 years, but 40 years to 60 years, or maybe even 80. So the nuclear reactors that are going on now, they need to be shut down and mothballed according to the laws that were in place when they were first created. He's got to get more than 10 of these back on track if he's going to have any hope of reaching carbon neutrality. So that's one of the issues that he has to confront now, this issue of extending the lifespan of these nuclear reactors and the opposition that people are going to have to it. And then in addition to that, to creating new modular nuclear reactors. And so there's a lot of technology sharing and investment that's going on there. You might remember the prime minister visited with President Joe Biden almost 10 days ago. And one of the things that they talked about was the sharing of technology. So this blend of the two countries on a lot of different levels, military, economic, technical, the chip agreement, that sort of thing, is really being, it's just really robust over these last 18 months, and it is expected to continue in that way. The other thing that he's got to deal with is wage increases. It's unavoidable. The consumer price index has increased by more than 4%. It's the largest in 18 years, even though many of the companies have agreed to wage increases about 2% for the last year. That was eaten up by inflation, and so real price wages, the real value of wages has decreased now for 8 months on end consecutively. 8 months it has declined. So Keidanren and Langley, the organization that represents a broad family of unions, met on Monday, a week ago from tomorrow, to discuss the Shunto offensive, the spring offensive, to talk about how much they're going to increase, what the prices are going to be, how the companies are going to help the employees raise it up. You remember Uniqlo announced that they're going to raise their prices, raise the wages of their employees 40%. They announced that 2 or 3 weeks ago. So there are some companies that are getting the message from the prime minister. I'm sure there's a little bit of tit for tat there, especially for the early adopters. But with Rengo and Keidanren, they have decided now that it will be maybe 4% or 5%. They will authorize that. So that's big business talking with unions. We've got another couple of months before they make decisions on that. But this is something that the prime minister definitely has to do. He's got to gear that up, and he's got to encourage these companies, either through a carrot or a stick, to pay their employees more. That's going to be a neat trick, because that's not the only thing he's got going on. He's got this other issue that he's got to confront, which is called, in nomenclature, the new capitalism. New capitalism it's somewhat complex. He hasn't really fully disclosed all of the intricacies of it, but he's rather strongly committed to it. And part of this is having the families who are sitting on all this money, the wealth that they've generated, to have them use it in a more productive way, to take it out of the banks, to take it out of the mattresses that they hide it in, because even if they put it in a bank, the amount of interest that they gain on it is so small. Some people don't even bother to do that. So the idea is to encourage them to invest it in something that's productive, that has a good return and a very low risk. So isn't that something that every investor wants? And it is, except this country, this culture has not been trained, hasn't been accustomed to that kind of way of, generating wealth or personal wealth. So it is a bit of a challenge for him. And the other challenge that he's got is this coalition of the opposition parties. So the knives were not out. The knives were kind of unsheathed a bit in the proceedings in the Diet this last week, where the Constitutional Democratic Party, Nippon Ishin, the Democratic Party for the People, these people are getting together and they're pointing their fingers at the prime minister, and they're saying, if you don't do it this way, you're going to have trouble with us. We want, higher wages for the employees. We want this military spending to go down. We don't want to pay more taxes. You're just kind of running roughshod over all of us. So a lot of complaints and criticisms there. They are forming coalitions that can be very damaging to the LDP in this April election. So he's got that to deal with. And just the continuing 20 years consecutively, the economy has gone down, real wages have gone down. Some people have done well, but it's generally not the working people. So that means that we talk about, excuse me, not just the Ministry of Finance, but something you alluded to earlier too, Maya, which is the Bank of Japan. So this is also on people's radar. It's also on the Prime Minister's radar. It's something that he needs to pay attention to. And the point here is Mr. Kuroda, who is the governor of the Bank of Japan, he is appointed by the Prime Minister. His term ends on April 9th or April 8th. His replacement, the candidates for his replacement, there needs to be 3 apparently. They will be introduced to the Diet on February 10th. So that's just 2 weeks away. They will be vetted, and they need to be approved by the Diet. The Prime Minister gets to select who the governor is, and generally speaking, he gets his way. So the moving of Mr. Kuroda, the ultra loose money policy maven, the person who has kept prices and maybe inflation, his target was, let's generate inflation. Inflation is good for us. Inflation will get us out of this doldrums that we've been in for the last 20 years, even though under the Abe 3-arrow policy, it didn't quite work. Inflation has now exceeded his expectations. It's gone from the 2% target to right now 4%. This last, in December, it was 4%. I don't know what it is in January. That'll be released in about a month's time. But who is going to replace Mr. Kuroda? There is some suggestion that there will be a policy shift. And the reason that this is so important, and they've tested the waters over the last 2 weeks, the Bank of Japan has made a little bit of a tweaking to the long-term, the bond yields for the 10-year bonds. And that's kind of like increasing the money supply, as in the United States and other countries. What the government pays or allows to be paid for these bond yields is somewhat similar to that. So for what the Bank of Japan did very surprisingly about 2 weeks ago was they increased the yield from what it was by 0.5%. And that shocked the markets because they were unprepared. They thought the Bank of Japan would just do what it's always done, just do nothing, just kind of continue to keep the interest rates low. And this tweaking upset the market and increased the yen value. The yen value was at 143, you might remember. The Bank of Japan intervened. Just 2 weeks ago, it was 128 to the dollar. That was huge. It's now back up to 129, but the Bank of Japan has a huge hold on how that is done. And for every 1% increase that is experienced on this bond market, that increases the amount the Japanese government needs to pay just for debt servicing. So you remember the budget number that we talked about, 114 trillion yen for fiscal 2023. For every 1%, he only went 0.5% this last time in tweaking the yield. If he goes 1%, another 5, which they could do, or maybe at some point in time, as the governor changes, for every 1%, that goes to, let me see, it increases by 3.7 trillion, just the debt servicing. That's $29 billion every year for debt servicing. It doesn't produce anything. It's just money that you have to pay for debt servicing. So the debt servicing amount for the entire country is 32 trillion for 2025 or 2023. So that's a lot of money not generating anything. 23 trillion, if you look at the entire defense budget, to go from 1% to 2%, that's 43 trillion. That's a lot of money. So whoever's going to be the governor of the Bank of Japan, and what he does, what Mr. Kuroda does, what he does in the next couple of months in the final terms, and who's going to replace him will be closely watched. So this is another thing that's sitting in the back of the mind of the Prime Minister. There are two other things I want to talk about in terms of Japanese politics and knowing what's going on and what to anticipate. You will remember, if you're a frequent listener to this channel, 1010 is the name of a gerrymandering scheme that was insisted upon by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that the vote disparity for the people who live in the rural areas and those who live in the bigger cities is so great that the government needs to change the districts where the seats are coming from in the lower house, in particular. So they have had maybe 16 court cases that have sued to nullify the last elections for the lower house, saying that the people in the rural areas, their vote counted almost 2 times, sometimes 3 times more than people who lived in the cities, because the population was higher there, but the number of seats had not increased in pace with the population movement, the movement from people from the rural areas to the urban areas. So 1010 represents 10 districts where a district will lose a member. There are 10 districts where they might have had 4 members of parliament represented. They will lose one, and there are 10 districts where they will gain them. The ones that will gain is the most populated, so that's Tokyo, Chiba, Kanagawa, Osaka. Those are the ones that are going to be increasing in numbers. And then in the really rural areas, they will lose a member. This is going to go into effect just for the lower house and just in the next election. It's going to come up very quickly now, though, and people can see it in action in the by-elections. So remember, I told you that the Prime Minister has to worry about the general local elections that happen in April. So he's got to pass the budget April 1st. Then he's going to start working quickly on the local elections, and hopefully the LDP does really well. And following that, if he does really well in the G7, then he'll probably close down the House and tell people what a good job I've done, and the tax areas that we've covered for defense spending that 50% of the people have agreed we need to do. maybe he's bolstered his image a little bit more, but these are the things that he has to do. So for the local elections that happen in April, he's got, there are three things that are going on there. There's an election for local mayors and governors. There's an election for city council members. And then there's the by-election for the 4 seats that are open. So for the governors and mayors of several of the big cities, it's not everybody in the world. It was at the end of the war that it all started at the same time. It was all in the spring. All of the mayors and the governors were elected on that day. It made voting and calculating the votes much easier. But throughout time, there's been a lot of different changes. So about 27% of the population will be under a voting scenario in April. So let me see. I think it's April 11th is the vote for governors and mayors. And then April 23rd are 2 elections. One is the local one for city assemblymen. And then the second one is for 4 diet seats, 4 lower house diet seats that have become open because of the death or the resignation or maybe the ejection of a member of the diet. And in this next election that's coming up, this next by-election, we have an example of all 4: death, leaving the office because of sickness, and being kicked out because of some sort of scandal. So it's interesting when you watch what's going on, and I have to explain a little bit of this because it's coming up and we'll probably hit on it again. But one of the election districts is Yamaguchi, where Prime Minister Abe was from. So his seat is open because he was assassinated and there's no replacement there. The problem with that is that whenever a diet seat comes open, within a 90-day period of time, there should be a by-election. They didn't do that with Mr. Abe out of respect for his death and because of the state funeral. So they're putting that one into the by-election this next time. Unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately for us because we get to watch this in action, 1010 in the old 1010, the election for Mr. Abe's seat will be under that scenario, that gerrymandering scheme, even though the same person running in Kumamoto, who are in Yamaguchi, that is running on the same day, if he has resigned recently, will be under the new 1010 because 1010 goes into effect on January 1st of this year. Sorry about that. Somebody started a vote. So with Mr. Abe, there's going to be a candidate to replace him. That seat will open up, and on the same day, his brother, Mr. Kishi, it is expected he will be resigning. He's got health issues. He was Minister of Defense, and you might remember he was frequently in a wheelchair or walking around on a cane. So it is expected that he will resign probably before March 17th, so that the cutoff date for falling into that next election. He's probably going to have his son run for him in that district. Probably he would win. The Abes are very, very strong in that district. The problem with Mr. Abe's seat, though, is that under the old 1010 and the new 1010. Sorry, is this really disturbing, Maya? Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Hopefully, the boat. Hopefully that boat will go away in a couple. Right.
It must be a listener. Anyway, it's confusing. I'm sorry, I'm not very eloquent in talking about this, but the point is that Mr. Abe's seat is going to open up, and then in the next election, his gerrymandering will kick in, and his election district will fall into the election district because it'll be absorbed by the election district that is held by Mr. Hayashi, who is the current foreign minister. So obviously, whoever wins the seat for Mr. Abe, they're going to lose that seat. It's going to be a one-term person in that seat, because the next election for the lower house after that, Mr. Hayashi is going to obviously win his new gerrymandered position. The Hayashi clan is very strong in that district in any event. It's always Abe and Hayashi. The two families have been at loggerheads for a long time. So they don't know who's to run. Sakie Abe has a person that she is favoring. The LDP isn't too sure. Nobody really wants to run because it's going to be a one-term member of parliament, and then guaranteed you're going to be out. The other one involves Mr. Kishi, who he's still in the parliament now. He hasn't resigned. He needs to vacate that seat, and we'll know that in early March. So it's something to look forward to. The third one is in Chiba, I think it's Chiba 5, the 5th district of Chiba. The LDP member there was forced to resign because of a funding scandal that he suffered from. He gave up the seat. He resigned, somewhat in disgrace. LDP member, and the LDP can't find anybody to run in that because the reason for the resignation and the influence of the LDP in that particular seat suggests that it won't be an LDP person who wins that seat. So how those seats shake out, how the rest of the 27% of the local assemblymen shake out in light of what's going on with the Unification Church and with what's going on with Mr. Abe, that will all be for us to see. And just before I close up, talking about the Unification Church, we were talking about that maybe a month ago. It was hot on the plate, and now it's kind of gone quiet. We're talking about defense spending. We're talking about the going from 1% to 2% and how that happened. We're talking about, childcare and the unprecedented level of increasing childbirths, that sort of thing. But the Unification Church issue is not dead. It was hot and it hampered the prime minister in the last extraordinary session. And it's only quiet now because the Unification Church is under investigation by a special committee within the Diet. And their investigation and their reports and the news that they've generated will be made public over the next couple of weeks or month. And as strong as the Unification Church was at the national level, at the political level in Nagatacho, it's much stronger in the local districts, and extracting that influence is much, much harder than it was at the national level. So there's still a lot of blood to be spilled there. When they go through this, there are a lot of people who are in the Diet or in local assemblies who owe their seats to the help that they've received from the Unification Church. So the fat lady has not sung on that one yet. With that, I'd like to wrap it up, Maya. I think I've gone a little bit overboard. I hope the explanation on 1010 and the gerrymandering was a little bit understandable. As we move into this more of a dissection on it as it comes up, we'll get into it, and I think it'll be a little bit more easy to understand and why it's so important that we talk about it.
Yes, I believe so too. And thank you, Timothy, for being there and standing. Yeah. Okay. And also, we've got some very nice comments about the noises,
That wasn't noise that I was generating, okay? So
you never know. We're not there to see firsthand. So, okay. Thank you. Okay, let's jump to Clubhouse and continue with the Q&A there.
Okay. I'm going to sign off here, and then I'll go down below. I'll close up the hatch, and we'll continue on with Q&A.
Great. Okay, see you there.
Thank you, Maya. Thanks, everyone.